My name is Noel Labine. I'm originally from Argyle, Minnesota. I live in Andover, Minnesota now. I was born in Long Beach, California. Both my parents were World War II Navy veterans. They met in San Francisco. I spent my early years in Norco, California, but I spent most of my life living on the farm northwest of Argyle. I was drafted in April 1968. Got on a bus in Warren, Minnesota, went to Fargo, got sworn in Fargo, and they put us on a train. The train left Fargo about midnight. We traveled all night, and the next day we were in Montana, spent most of the day traveling through Montana, and then the night again over the mountains into Washington. So early in the morning we arrived in Seattle on the second day by train, and we were picked up with a bus and taken to Tacoma, to Fort Lewis, Washington, where we stayed in old barracks, two-story wooden barracks made during World War II. And we had a drill sergeant who was in his last bit of service. It was interesting. He wasn't as tough and mean as some of the other drill sergeants. I remember him explaining to us that if we just played by the rules, he wanted this to end sweet. This was his last assignment before he got out of the Army. But there was still some scuffing going on. It was interesting. I remember pulling KP, and they were rinsing the dishes right. When I went to St. John's University, I worked with cleaning the pots and pans, and there was this old German that taught me how to do it. You'd use plenty of soap and hot water, but you made sure you rinsed all the soap out. And they weren't doing that, and a lot of guys had runs because you get too much soap in their diet. And I told the chief cook that they weren't rinsing the dishes right, and he told me I wasn't paid to think. So that problem didn't go away. The other thing was some of the guys, if you could make E2 out of basic, but you had to do something unusual. And one of the things that would work is if you volunteered to be a squad leader, but everybody who volunteered to be a squad leader ended up in trouble because they didn't know what they're doing. But I happened to luck out because when we went on these marches, sometimes we'd go into double time, and they always had someone carrying the flag. And most guys couldn't run and carry the flag, but I was pretty strapped and healthy, having all that strength from working on the farm and that kind of thing. So I would pick up that spot, and I ended up, that was my spot almost all the time, because when we ran, I not only wouldn't drop the flag, I would spin it. And everybody loved that. And I didn't get in trouble. I never goofed up, and I made E2 out of basic.
So you were somewhat of a suck-up.
I know it seems like that. All I did was, but it really was an advantage being in the front, because when they, there's that accordion effect. You're way in the back of a long line of marchers. That was really a workout.
Because the rear guard had to run up.
Oh yeah, they were at halftime. They were behind and then running up, but the one in the front sets the pace. So I wanted to stay in that spot because it was easier, and handling the flag was no problem. But I was a suck up, but I wasn't. I was a dumb suck up.
Yeah.
Because they asked. They had these different rallies, and one of them they asked how many people want to jump out of an airplane, and I raised my hand. That instantly put me in AIT. My orders after basic then was to go to advanced infantry training at Fort Gordon, Georgia.
So this was after basic training?
Yeah, I went home for a couple weeks.
Tell us a little bit about your basic training experience. What did you do?
Besides the marching?
Besides the marching. What's some of the stuff they had you do?
Besides the KP, I thought, the other things we did is, it was really beautiful. We bivouacked a lot around the woods in the foothills of the Olympia Mountains. I remember asking where are we at, and they said, well, we're by the Olympia Mountains, which makes sense. We're not that far from them. Fort Lewis isn't, I mean.
Did you see Fort Rainier in the morning then?
Pardon me?
Did you see Fort Rainier very often? Or not Fort Rainier?
I was 8 weeks in basic, and 6 weeks of those was constant rain. I remember them telling us, don't ride home and say it rains in the Army. It doesn't rain in the Army, it rains on the Army. That was a funny joke. but 2 weeks it didn't rain, and right out of the window in barracks, I could see every evening. I could see the sun shining on Mount Rainier.
Yep.
Yeah, it was pretty.
So
That was a,
did you go through tear gas chambers or any of that stuff?
oh yeah, yeah. You know, I did AIT in Fort Gordon too, and I get confused sometimes where I learned what. But I did the gas training, and I was not a good thrower. The grenade one, I remember, you pull the pin and then you throw the grenade. And I remember the grenade did not go very far, and the instructor looked at me with this look of horror on his face, and he said, "Get down!" We got down, and the grenade exploded just a few feet away. But nevertheless, when I was working infantry in Vietnam, I had a grenade right on my pocket, right on my waist. I mean, because the close range, that was a pretty effective weapon.
Right.
I had to make sure I hit the ground after I threw it.
So after basic training, you went to Fort Gordon, is that right?
Yeah, Fort Gordon. And it was a AIT camp called Camp Crockett on the fringes of Fort Gordon. That was a real rough place. It was the worst living experience I had in the Army. It was worse than Vietnam. And we spent a lot of time outside in the hot Georgia summer, hot, humid weather. We did patrols at night where we had to use just a compass to get through woods at night. And, you know, I can't remember where we crawled under live ammo, but a lot of guys are saying that happened in basic. I remember one incident in AIT training where we were getting ready for a simulated war games where some people were going to hold positions and others were going to come after them. And I noticed as we were getting ready, one guy had a live bandolier, live ammo around his neck. And I went up to the training sergeant and I said, "Are we using live ammo in this experience?" And he said, "No, it should be all blanks." I said, "Well, you better go talk to that guy over there because he's got live ammo around his shoulders." Well, it's crazy how many accidents there was. I mean, I could tell you more stories about accidents, but like I said, I'm going to digress, and I'm not going to get to say everything I want to.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yep. So, AIT.
I wanted to fly helicopters. I tried to get into that. I took training. I passed the written test, but I didn't pass the physical because I have astigmatism in my eye. So then Dad got me a what's it called? A Blue Cross, a Red Cross, to come home and help with harvest.
Red Cross.
Well, I got a break, came home for help with harvest, and Butch Virgin had just got back from Vietnam, I remember, and I was talking to him and telling him what, I was going through training, and I decided to try to get into the non-commissioned officer training because I couldn't get into helicopter school. And he told me, "Oh, don't do that." He says, "You get over to Vietnam, the last thing you want to be is a leader if you don't know what you're doing." So I took his advice, and it was good advice. And I got back to Georgia, and I got out of the NCO school. It was a bit of a trick to get out, but I managed it. And then I got put into a holding company. This was out of AIT. I was in Benning then.
When you say got out of the NCO school, you didn't get your? Usually, you get sergeant. Were you shake and bake? Is that what that was?
That was a shake and bake, yeah. And I got out of it. I had started the school at Fort Benning, and then I went home on the leave. That's what happened. And then when I came back, it ended up I had to extend my ETSA date to stay in NCO school, and I said, "No way in hell." And they said, "You sorry, son of a gun, you're going to go to Vietnam." I said, "Yes, Sergeant, I'm going to Vietnam." Got put in a holding company, and then I got sent to scout dog training in Benning. Spent 4 more months in training in Fort Benning, training with German Shepherds.
So you were dog handler?
Like a dog handler, yep. Infantry advisor. We walked with squads, and we would advise as to enemy movement. We weren't told it at the time, but afterwards, as I studied the history of the war, I learned that whole dog team thing was really ramped up because the Charlie Company, I think of the 2nd and the 22nd, ran into a whole encampment of BC and got shot up really bad. Everyone killed except 2 were really hurt bad. And they said they don't want that to happen again, so they wanted to have as many dog teams as possible working with the ground troops to keep them from walking into ambush. That was our main purpose. And we were trained to treat our dogs like that, but the leadership for a lot of these squads didn't understand that. They thought we were just another gun, another rifleman, you know. But we were always arguing with them about, no, that's not what we do. So we went through really good training in Benning, and then I came home for 30 days. I actually didn't stay in Argyle. I went to spend some time with a friend who I went through training with in Colorado, and then I went to Los Angeles and spent some time with my mother's family before shipping out to Vietnam. We flew out of the Bay Area.
Where did you ship out of?
Out of the Bay Area.
So Oakland, or?
Went to Oakland, I think. Yeah, we were in Oakland. I remember we got to leave to go to San Francisco. There's about 3-4 of us went there a day or two before we shipped over. We got overnight in San Francisco. But I can't remember what airport. If it was the Oakland airport, or I know coming back we came in Sacramento, but I can't remember what airport out of the Bay Area. And from there we flew up to Anchorage. So
going over, when you were in Oakland, did you have to serve steaks to the ones coming back? Did you go through that ordeal?
No, I don't remember any contact with anybody coming back.
Well,
no, we weren't there.
This is on you mean the ones coming back you never had any contact with?
Right.
Okay.
I don't remember that we did. It's interesting how, that's over 50 years ago, so we remember certain things and others we don't.
Right.
Yeah. So in Anchorage, I liked it going over Anchorage. That was fun because, when we left Georgia, it was rainy and cold. It was the worst miserable winter weather is in Georgia. I feel sorry at people that spend winter down in Georgia and Florida because it can get really cold. I spent some time in Florida sleeping on the beach in Miami Beach, freezing my ass off. I remember that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then we get to Minnesota and it was 20 below, which felt better than Georgia. But we get to Anchorage and it was like, this was in March, it was like 30 degrees. It felt great. It was really nice weather there. Got to walk in and have a drink in the airport. And we get back on the plane and somebody said bombs. We all had to get off the plane.
Seriously? You got a drink in the airport while you were going over?
Oh, yeah.
Only you know it.
And somebody yelled bomb, we had to get up against. We ended up about 5 hours in Anchorage. Then we flew to Japan. And there was an Air Force base at Kyoto. I remember flying over a pretty big city there. I used to think it was by Tokyo, but I was just looking at the map here the other day. It's actually further south of Tokyo. Then we went into Vietnam. In Vietnam, when I remember getting off the plane, the air was so heavy, it smelled. It was just incredible. I still have that memory of the Orient. It really has a strong odor. And the first couple weeks, I wasn't assigned to a unit yet there. We hung around Long Bend, Benoit. I forget exactly where the camp was, but the first couple of days, they just had us filling sandbags and, trying to keep from passing out from the heat. I remember sweating, and it was just getting used to that climate was something. Then we got assigned to a dog training unit right there in Benoit, where we were assigned dogs. And the dog they gave me was brain dead. It was no good. And I told the trainer, I said, this dog isn't throwing an alert on anything. It's no good. Well, it's the dog you get. You're stuck with it. So then the guys that we were assigned to, the 35th Infantry Platoon Scout Dog out of Zion, they came to pick us up after we'd gone through the 2-week training period.
The 35th what?
It's the 35th Infantry Platoon Scout Dog.
Okay. Yep.
IPSD. And so went to Zion, which wasn't that far from Benoit. And then, in between, my dog died. But I don't want to go into that. I just all these little vignettes I'm going to miss out.
I'm gonna tell a little story about that if you don't mind.
No, I don't want to hear about your
I was haying in Montana with John Larson when you wrote him a letter about 2-year dogs. You go into that a little bit.
I don't want to. I don't do dead dog stories anymore.
Okay.
I have a whole other genre of stories I'd rather tell. So the point is, I ended up reporting for duty with. I remember it was Lieutenant Fournier. I said, "This is but then I was a PFC, so I just said, Private Labine reporting for duty with one dead dog, sir." And I'm holding the dead dog, and he says, "Never mind the dead dog. You can have my dog." Well, his dog was no good either. His dog was an infantry, what do you call it? A rear pet. It just hung around the rear area and hadn't been in training for a long time. And they gave me that dog, and I went out in the field with it, and it was no good. So they sent me back to it takes a while to set up training, even you know, especially in Vietnam. You had guns and everything. We'd be actually doing invitation patrols, so the enemy could attack you. So it was a big thing to set up. So when that dog didn't work, they said, get in the Jeep, go back to the base, go in the kennel. There's 2 dogs there, Lobo and Jeep. Pick one and come back. So that's what I did, and I grabbed Lobo, went back. They ran me through the routine with Lobo, and they said, okay, that's your dog. Get your gear ready. You're going out in the field tomorrow. Because I've been in country for 3-4 weeks. I hadn't done anything yet. So, but what we did is when we sent new teams out, we'd have an experienced person go with. So I had a good experienced person on happening. And we went to Fort Apache, right outside Saigon. It was in a rice paddy area. We got out there, first day on patrol in Vietnam, and we at one point we were walking on the top of these rice paddies, and we were going to have to walk in water to get to some drier ground again. And the leader of the platoon had a map out, and he's looking at the map, and one of the guys said, "Where are we?" And he said, "Somewhere in South Vietnam." That was a memory, humorous memory. I enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. So I ended up being in that patrols around Saigon were uneventful. It wasn't until later in service there we moved up into the Dao Tiang was on the Saigon River where the Ho Chi Minh River Trail came in from Cambodia, and it went through the Mechlin Rubber Plantation. There was a lot of action. A lot of rocket fire. Even though the first time I was attacked by rockets wasn't Ben Wa. The first 3-4 days I was there, remember, it hit the barracks. The rocket hit the barracks I was in. We all went down into a bunker, and I lit a cigarette. And one guy said, "What are you doing lighting a cigarette? They can see you. You're shooting." I said, "We're inside of a base camp." They were already shooting at us with rockets, not rifles. I thought it was kind of funny. Another guy got hit, and he said, "Am I going to get a Purple Heart?" And the sergeant there said, "Gary, don't worry about your Purple Heart for a little scratch." You know, those things stick out in your mind. You know, it's looking back, you know, you got to have empathy for him because it was a scary experience. No doubt about it.
So how long were you there, Noel, in Vietnam?
I was in the country 11 months and 11 days. That's including my R&R to Bangkok. So I was in the Army 22 months. I was born on the 11th month of the 11th day. I spent 11 months and 11 days in country. I thought that's kind of interesting. So anyway,
so where did you say where you went to? Did you go to Bangkok for?
Bangkok.
Yep.
Went to Bangkok for a week. Yeah.
In Thailand, yep. Okay, and you spent a week there. And but about when in your tour did you go?
Well, I got in country in March, and I believe I went in October.
March of what year?
March of 1969. I went to Bangkok in October. I believe it was October. It could have been early November, but in the fall of '69. So I'm about 6-7 months into my tour. Okay.
So is there anything that really stands out in your mind about Vietnam that you can share with us?
Yeah, I got all kinds of stories. You know, I wrote a book too. It's called Crossing the Stream, and crossing the stream is a metaphor for streams of consciousness. We had a different stream of consciousness while we were in country, especially in the infantry, than we had here in the world. We called this the world. This was a different stream of consciousness here. So that's why I called the book Crossing the Stream. And I created 5 stories about my experiences or those that happened to others. That it was that kind of explains what it was like being over there. And then 5 stories about me traveling America when I got back. But one of the stories I don't have in that book, that's probably the scariest thing that happened to me. We were working a patrol of the Mechlin Rubber Plantation, and there was a captain leading 2 platoons, or a company of men, I guess it would be. It was usually a platoon would only be 8 to 10 guys, and we'd work often in small units like that. But this was a whole company, and there were probably 30 or more people. And I was walking flank because it was such a big. I was training a new guy in, a kid from New Jersey, and I didn't want to be walking point when I was training somebody because I had to stay real alert to that person's. I'm going to hang this up. I had to stay real alert to that person's needs. And the walking point, you have to stay real alert to what's going on in front. So I was walking flank, because all with the dog, you didn't want to be in the middle of the pack. You wanted to be in the outside somewhere, so get some use out of the dog. And it was a new dog, and the dog wasn't alerting so good, but I caught an alert. I saw a Vietnamese going, we're going south in a southerly direction. I saw off in the distance this Vietnamese running through the rubber plantation, heading north. So when we, a few minutes later, we stopped to break, and I told the command that. I said, I spotted an unusual, Vietnamese movement. So he made everybody dig in, and I didn't. What's going on digging in? Then that's the only character I ever worked with, where the guys were all carrying shovels. I said, what's this about? Well, they had a forward observer who was calling in the big guns from the Navy, is what I understood. Anyway, he said he'll call that shit right in on top of us. I remember talking to that forward observer afterwards. He was a West Point graduate, so they were running a pretty heavy outfit. But the thing is, we sat there and took all kinds of shelling. I have no idea whether he hit that one person or not, but certainly spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to do it. And then we went a few more feet and set up for night bivouac, or night ambush, they called it. But this was no ambush. It was moving through the jungle like a steamroller. Hell, you could hear him coming 2 miles away. So no stealth at all. And they're setting up a perimeter, and everybody's digging in. I didn't have a shovel. I believed that if I was going to die, I was going to die. I wasn't worried about death at that point in my experience there. I just figured I've seen too many situations where people would get luck out because they had be somebody else somewhere else. There was a lot of fate. I really believe in fate a lot. But anyway, this kid from Jersey wasn't taking training very well. Didn't know what he was doing, and we were usually sat in the middle of command because we were advisory. And I didn't feel like talking about the times, but I wanted to meet some of these other guys that had more experience. And so I said to the fellow, I said, just stay here in the middle. And I went out to the perimeter and I started talking to two guys that were digging in about how many patrols they've been on, where they had gone, where was there heavier fire, and learning more about the lay of land. And meanwhile, there was a village in the distance, even to the urban, they see that village.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Notion I should probably go. Pardon me?
Yeah, you kind of froze up there a little bit. Keep going, Noel. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, at some point I had this notion I should go back and talk to this guy that I was training. So I turned to quit talking to these two guys and started heading towards the middle, and all of a sudden I heard this whistle coming in. I knew it was a rocket, so I hit the ground. The rocket hit the tree that I had been leaning against, knocked both those guys out of commission. And we had to then work to get a helicopter to dust them off, and one of them died before he got out of there. The other one ended up, the rumor has it, went to Japan. So that was a pretty close scare for me. I mean, that rocket was aimed right at my head. So I remember the next day, the old man, we had our small unit, and this first lieutenant was our commanding officer for our attached unit, 35th IPSD. And he showed up with 2 dog teams, just out of the blue. He said he was going to patrol here, there's some action out here, want to see what's going on. And I said, oh, good. I said, then we're going back in, because 1 dog team's enough, especially with this organization. 3 would be crazy, so I want to go back in. So he didn't argue with me. I took the new guy and the dog and me and went back in. And I had enough of the war for that day.
Can't blame me there.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to bring up? No?
How much more time I got?
Just keep going. We'll go until it stops. Let's talk a little bit. Okay, let's get you out of there to start out with, okay? We can always go back. But you left out of where? Cameron Bay, or where'd you leave out of?
Oh, when I flew back, yeah. It was with the 1st Division when they broke up, and we all went down to Zion to stand down, and there was orders were being cut for guys that were short, had a little bit of time left. They were sending them home. A lot of other guys were getting reassigned to other units. We were in a great big top. We put up a big tent. Actually, we didn't have to put it up. It was put up for us, but that's where we were staying, in this big area where the decisions were being made. We were waiting to see what happened next. And I expected to go home because I didn't have that much time left. But I had got reassigned to the holding company, or the company that was in charge of guarding the wire.
So was this like February of 69 then, or 70?
Yes.
69.
This was like the middle of February of 1970. And
because
another guy.
there were about 400, 500,000 troops there at the time, right? They were winding down.
Well, they're sending the 1st Division home. I think 1st Division is the 1st Division they decided to send home. And all their stuff was going to be given over to the regular Arvin Army, the Vietnamese Army. Regular Vietnamese Army, we call them Arvins. So we had gotten all our trucks fixed up and stuff, and so that was all going to be given over to the Vietnamese. And a lot of guys are getting reassigned. And I was disappointed because I got put in charge of the, I'm calling it a replacement company, but there's probably another name for it. But they were more or less, one of the things they did at that company was guard the wire. And they wanted all these infantrymen there. Everybody that was on working the guard at night was hardened infantry, because there was all these people were coming in to Zion. They were bringing in dancers from Australia, and it was truckloads of beer, and it was just a big hootenanny. Well, we get into the, I remember we got into the command station there, can't think of, orderly room. And there was this great big Puerto Rican sergeant that was running the place. It was real obvious, even though there was a captain sitting in the chair, there was this Puerto Rican that was running it. And he said, I need one of you guys to be sergeant of the guard. Well, the other guy that was with me was a clerk, even though he also was an E6. All he ever did was clerking. And so I said, well, I'll be sergeant of the guard. Well, when I got to hold the formation the next morning, there was some tough guys. I'm telling you, these guys had chains around their neck. They had shaved. They were wearing dirty clothes. They just come out of the jungle. They were hardened infantrymen, and I had to tell them that they had to go guard every night. There was no boozing allowed, no marijuana, no girls. They just had, their job was to keep everybody else safe. Which is, I was thinking as I was telling them too, this is so unfair. These guys always got screwed. They always got the worst end of the deal. If anybody deserved a break, it was them. But command wanted these hardened guys on the wire. So I had to tell them, and I told them, and using all the most colorful language I grew up with and knew about, that if they didn't show up on the wire, I was going to bust them. So then I was concerned that one of them was going to frag me. So I remember getting a guard. One of the guys there was a few guys that were on some exemption. One of this guy was a guy who had done long-range reconnaissance patrol. And he was with there, and so he was pretty handy with the knife and stuff. And I said, "Could you be my guard? Because I want someone watching my backside in case somebody comes in here and wants to frag me." Because they was a pretty rough looking bunch, I'm telling you. Well, it ended up that he was a bastard case. And it was scary as hell. But meanwhile,
what was your rank at this time?
My rank was staff sergeant, E6. So this guy. But one of the other guys got reassigned. His name was Cambridge from Washington State. He's still alive today. I still stay in touch with him. He came down from Light K. He got reassigned up to Light K. He came down and he told me, he says, "No," he says, "Do you know why? You know why we're all still pulling the duty when we should be back going home? It's because of that deal you made with that sergeant to fix up our equipment. It's a long story, but it got real involved. So anyway, this guy had it in for us, and he had connections in the administration office at 1st Division headquarters, but so did Camber, and Camber's one that came to tell me about this. So I remember the next day I went to the top sergeant and I told him, I said, "I think I've gotten the back end of the deal here," and I told him what had happened, and he says, "Yeah, it sounds like you probably did. You should go see the inspection general and tell them the story." So he gave me his Jeep, and I went over and told the inspection general, because the only thing I did was hold morning formation. I didn't have to do the wire at night. They had someone else do that, so I had all day stuff like that. Well, after I told the inspector general what happened, I took the Jeep and went back to the orderly room, and the sergeant said, "They just approved you should go to home, so you've got all these places you got to visit. You got to visit dentist shops, this and that, so get on it." So I went back again. I was going to visit all these stations, and I get back to the other room, And he says, get your gear. We report to Long Bend, or you're going to be flying out. You're going to go home. And because he really appreciated what I did. I mean, I can't believe how quickly he put this together. So I get to Long Bend. I'm waiting for the airplane home. And I asked these guys, and we're all in this bunk room, you know. I said, how long have you been here? And they said, oh, about 3 days. Oh, so I figured I'm going to be waiting around for 3 days. So I got some beer, smoked some marijuana, and I'm having a party and having a good time. And they call my name on the speaker. Go get on the plane. Like this guy, I'm telling you, these Puerto Ricans, these old master sergeants, they ran the army. This guy he had me on that bird in no time. I mean, I was still.
It was a commercial flight, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. It was like a Northwest flight.
What was it like when it left the ground?
Oh, there's a big yell. When that Freedom Bird picked up, it was just a yahoo! The lightest I've ever felt in my life. You felt like you were flying, that's for sure. And I spent a lot of time in the air there. I got a infantry or air medal, over 25 flights in a helicopter, but nothing beat that Freedom Bird.
Yeah. And how many stops do you have on the way home?
I had one in Honolulu. I stopped the plane again to go in and have a drink.
That was your first stop, was Honolulu? Was
the only stop.
Huh?
Only stop. The only stop between Sacramento and Long Bend was Honolulu.
Oh, wow. So get home, you got in Sacramento, get your steak supper or not, or what?
Yeah, you know, there was probably a steak. I remember when they gave us these new uniforms, but it was such a mess. But we actually ran around like crazy. We got in like on a noon on a Saturday, or it was late Saturday morning. And the guy said, if you guys do everything right and you make sure about it, there's always somebody standing in line. There was these different lines you had to get through. So I remember they put me, I volunteered to be in charge of that to make sure of these lines. He said, if you guys get done before midnight, then you're done. You're out of here.
So you were getting your discharge papers? You were getting your discharge papers? Is that what's going on?
to get discharged. Or to reassign. I suppose some guys were getting reassigned, but
right.
You had to go through a process anyway. But yeah, we got discharged. So it was real late, and then I think there was a meal involved there, but I don't remember that being a big deal. We were just anxious to get out of the Army. And we went to the PX and bought these cheap clothes, I remember, because as soon as we got out, we wanted to get out of the uniforms, because we'd heard all the stories about, you didn't want to be in a uniform when you got back. So we bought these cheap PX clothes, I remember. Then we went to the Oakland bus depot. I wanted to go down and see Jeannie and Buckshot. We go down to Long Beach. It was March, it was late February. There's no reason to go to Argyle in late February. So I remember I was in that bus depot, and I had a short timer stick. That's something when the guys were short, they only had a few days left. That was an extra tool. A lot of guys carved their names on it. So I said, well, this is a keepsake. So I had that short timer stick. And I remember I was in a men's room getting out of the uniform into these cheap PX clothes, and this fellow came in and wanted to know if anybody had a change for 10. And I told him, I said, I just bought a bus ticket. The guy down at selling tickets got all kinds of cash. I just saw it. So he left momentarily, and he came back and said, well, he didn't have 2 5s. I'm looking for 2 5s. So I was, okay, I had a bunch of cash, because they gave me a whole bunch of money when I mustered out. It's a lot of money. So I took 2 5s out, and I was turning it over to him, and I noticed on the $10 bill there's a picture of George Washington. So I helped hold on to my 5s. I said, I don't want that. And he's pulling on my 5s, when I didn't want that counterfeit 10. So I grabbed my short timer stick and I said, look, buddy, you better let go, because I'm not trying to use it. I was ready to sock him, and he knew it. It was a funny moment.
Yeah. So you stuck around California for a while, or? Yeah,
for a while. Somebody said they got back and they didn't kiss the girl, and I remember that's one thing I did. I kissed the tarmac at Sacramento when we got off that plane. I was so glad to be back. But yeah, I spent, at least 2 weeks or more in Long Beach.
So
it's been a while there, huh?
So then did you end up back in Argyle for a while, or?
Yeah, well, Dad said, I could plant 240 acres. I could farm that, so I came back, and it rained all that spring. It was just unbelievable. just wouldn't stop. We didn't go into the field till June.
So that was
It was a long
1970.
week. 1970, yeah. It was
Yeah.
a really wet spring. So once I got the field planted, then I went down to the Twin Cities and I found work there. I remember.
Doing what? What were you doing, Noel? What were you doing for work? What were you doing?
Well, I had worked for the salesman that handled women's clothes and children's clothing. It went to different big towns in the Midwest, and I got a job back with him again. I drove his van. I'd move all the clothes into the mezzanine when he'd display them. And I was hoping I could get that. You know, he was an old guy, Bernie K was his name. And I was kind of hoping that he would be willing to let me take over that line when he was ready to retire. But I found out that summer he wasn't going to do that. He wasn't going to set up anybody. So I made some extra cash, and then I came back to Argyle to help with the harvest. I didn't want to I wasn't anxious to hang around Argyle, I remember that. It was awkward being at home after that experience I had in Vietnam. I wasn't a real good house person anymore. I was more or less fit for tents in man camps. It wasn't good living at home. So I spent a couple of years just in the wind. You know, I had jobs all over the United States. I traveled all over for 2 years. That's, like I said, that book, Crossing the Stream, those last 5 stories are about that. I was just all over the place, hitchhiking, jumping trains. I had a job in construction in North Carolina, factories in Southern California. I went back to Southern California with that's right. The following year, ended up getting with our cousin Dennis Bergeron in the strawberry business, and so that ended up being really good for the Bergerons there. But that year, that was interesting how we got that going.
Yep. Dennis came back to Argyle for a while too.
Yeah, I got into the floor installation business. That's something he talked me into doing. He always had ideas. Interesting character. But when I worked construction in North Carolina, Dennis was there with me too.
So you're kind of like two peas in a pod.
There's a lot of those guys that were Vietnam vets that didn't live very long. Like this, he died in his early 40s, a drug overdose. But this fellow Don Happening that trained me at Fort Apache, he ended up committing suicide. I remember talking to his mother. We were the first time the guys all got together was in 1988. We'd been back about 18 years. We were going to get together. And I remember I had a lot of phone numbers of guys, and so I remember calling Dr. his mother, and he had committed suicide. So that's one of the stories that's in that book I wrote, and I'm a tribute to him. But since then, I've at least 3 other guys I served with in Vietnam have committed suicide. So there's a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder issues.
And that's why when you call the VA, the first thing you get is the VA helpline.
Yeah, they still do
Suicide
that.
line, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems, especially these guys coming back from these recent wars with the head injuries. A lot more head injuries with the IEDs.
Right.
Is that what they call them, IEDs?
Yep. And then anything else you want to go back on Vietnam that, or your military experience, another story, anything?
Well, I've got all kinds of stories.
We're starting to freeze up here a little bit too.
I could talk about how he's still. Oh yeah, that's internet band.
Yeah, we're starting to freeze up here. I think we're.
I'm not having it today. Yeah.
No, well, I think we're gonna have to end it.
Yeah, we're probably gonna have to end it because we are freezing up a lot.
But before I go, I want to just thank you for doing this interview. Appreciate everything you've done, and thanks for your service.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. I appreciate what you're doing too, and I look forward to when you get interviewed. I'd like to know more about your experiences as well.
Okay, I'll let you know when it happens. Thank you, Noel. Have a good one.